Greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome back to my latest video. Unless you're new, then welcome for the first time. I like to make these little videos about films that I enjoy and want to share. If you enjoy this video, then please give me a thumbs up and consider both subscribing and hitting that little bell icon to get notifications for when I put up new content, which is typically once or twice a week. Okay. Now that all of that is out of the way, let's do a quick little spoiler-free dive into Insidious, The Red Door, which just released this weekend. So for a quick bit of background here, I'd seen Insidious, The Conjuring, and later Annabelle, but I hadn't really kept up with any of those franchises and the series, or any of the films in that franchise. But then recently, I came across a few of them used on Blu-ray, and then I just decided to go through all of them, every single thing in it. I believe I did that in a course of only a few days. Kind of went overboard, but would say that the Insidious films were probably my favorite out of those. I really enjoyed the world that they'd kind of built in that first film, continuing it, within the second, and then also getting to see those prequel stories in parts 3 and 4 to kind of open it up a bit more. So, and I really liked seeing how part 4 kind of ends with a leading up to what happens in the events of the first film. So this entry was supposed to mark the end of the Insidious story, kind of just within this family from the first and second film in particular. But anyways, a very simple, quick little synopsis I found for this is: the Lamberts must go deeper into the further than ever before to put their demons to rest once and for all. So not a lot to go on there, but I actually hadn't even seen a trailer for this one until just a few days before I checked out the film. This one takes place roughly a decade after the second film, and there are some problems happening in the family. The grandmother the one who's played by Barbara Hershey, has passed away, and our leads, the parents, have gotten divorced, and Dalton, the kid who was the subject of the first film in particular, is being in the coma and kind of stuck in the further. Now he's heading off to college. And of course, he and his father are not really getting along very well, and after he dropped him off at college, some strange things start to happen. They start to kind of slowly unravel. So as you may remember at the end of part 2, the father and son were just kind of hypnotized to have their memories wiped of anything that had happened within the further, everything that happened in those first 2 films, as well as to a point where it'll make them unable to astrally project and end up in the further in the future. So, but as the father in this story has been having some weird memory problems and a lot of stress, and the son has been in his art class kind of diving almost like into his subconscious a bit more for inspiration for his work, they slowly start to break down that barrier that was in place from the hypnosis, and their past starts kind of coming back, including experiencing, the hauntings and traveling into the further. So what really pulls this film along, of course, is the mystery aspect, because though we know more about the further than these characters, than the father and son do, having, us seen the previous films and everything, they spend just enough time kind of bringing us along on their journey, their discovery of what's happening with them and revealing their past. It's not so much that we get tired of knowing more than them, though, if that makes any sense. It's their discovery is just kind of paced well alongside other things that are happening within the story. Other relationships, within the family, what Dalton is going through being away at college, meeting a new friend and getting to know her, and, the aftermath of everything from the funeral that the dad is dealing with. So while we know more about the further than these characters, it never felt tedious waiting for them to kind of catch up with, remembering stuff from those first 2 films. But I think we really get this sense that the entire point of this story is to kind of wrap up this story for this family, to kind of close that red door, to cut off things from the further, and to live happily ever after. Just to end that, this family story arc. And it was great to see so many returning, not just the characters, but the actors who portrayed them in the first place. Seeing Ty Simpkins kind of, grown up was great because, rather than him being recast, because we've seen that with a lot of films, but I hadn't really kept up with his work. I'd seen Insidious, those 2 films, the Jurassic World films, and Iron Man 3. But I didn't even recognize him at the end of Endgame when he shows up at that funeral. But, having him come in to reprise this role this way, and he did a very excellent job with that, just really made this stronger connection with this character. Just did an excellent job, as did Patrick Wilson, taking on the directing duties of this film. He really brought the screen, this film to screen perfectly, and the way that he framed some of his shots, especially keeping certain things in a distance, out of focus, and then slowly bringing certain things in. It's not quite as in your face as some other films that I've seen. You know, it works better than how I've seen films really rely on just jump scare after jump scare to try to build the tension. Because, you know, while jump scares can be useful, you know, just like gore or shock, after a while I can get kind of desensitized to it. And then the story that's left usually isn't strong enough to keep me involved. But with this one, they balanced those kinds of jumps. He did this interesting thing with stuff just out of frame or off in the distance, out of focus, to slowly build that tension to bring you in rather than just throwing jumps at you. He did an excellent job with that. Those slow, tense builds, they just really came across great. And finally, the practical effects and CG effects with this, I would have to say that, you know, as I've seen in other Insidious installments, they really did a good job with this. They're really good with it, because the CG was used to extend certain scenes and certain sequences, add a little bit more depth, and sometimes take on the heavy lifting if practical effects just aren't practical. But it never felt over the top. It never really stuck out. I just felt like the shots were put together perfectly and very well balanced. And all in all, really with this film, if you enjoyed the previous Insidious films, you'll enjoy this one as well. Luckily, if you need a refresher on those previous ones, you only need to check out part 1 and 2, since parts 3 and 4 are prequels, and this one is just a direct sequel to part 2. This is what's happening about a decade later. Really seems that this is indeed the ending for this family's story within the Insidious universe, and I say that because there's another film in that universe coming out around the corner, starring Kumail Nanjiani and Mandy Moore. So that one's going to be interesting to check out as well, it seems like, which, you know, just like this one, it's definitely worth checking out, especially on the giant screen. And speaking of checking out, thanks for checking out this latest little video of mine for Insidious: The Red Door, which is in theaters now. It's definitely worth checking out. And thanks for sticking around to the end, and I will see you in the next one.